Hi, Peter. Thank you so much for joining the CSR communication series that I run on my blog, Introscope. Really appreciate you taking the time to do this. So, as you know, this series has been run for a few years on my blog, and I interview thought leaders and ask them their views on how they see the domain of CSR and communications evolving. So, before we get started, it would be great if you could quickly introduce yourself to our viewers.
Yes, so thank you very much for the invitation. Much appreciated, Anisu. It's a pleasure to be on this video call. So my name is Peter Brun. I'm the Chief Communications Officer of VFS Global, and in there, of course, comes also the responsibility for corporate social responsibility, or just sustainability, as we also call it internally. I used to work as a journalist before. I changed into communications 15 years ago. At that time, back in my home country in Switzerland, for a travel company called Kuoni, which is also quite known in India. Today it's called SOTC. And that's when I started my kind of corporate communications career. And meanwhile, I'm since 2016, so almost 4 years now, with VFS Global at the head office here in Dubai.
Fantastic. And I know you're used to probably asking questions and being on the interviewer side. So I've noticed that you're part of Radio Zurich. So let me get started by asking you the first question. So how do you define CSR or sustainability, and how is it defined by organization? Why is it so important in terms of communicating CSR for your organization?
I think it becomes more and more important for companies, especially when they are acting globally. Although I must say, even if they are acting or being active regionally or in a country, I think CSR, or the sustainability topic, is for every company who wants to be a good global citizen or national good citizen important. And especially, of course, when you're a listed company. We're not a listed company, we're a privately held company, but when you're a listed company, you anyway very much obliged to follow certain regulations. I know in India also, even if you're not listed, you have to follow certain regulations, which is a good thing. And but more and more companies definitely set up properly CSR concepts or entire teams in a company, and especially the ones that are listed already for many, many years. And even more and more investors are interested to look at how sustainable is a company, because they see a lot of value, future value in that. And that's then mainly also when the companies follow kind of a ESG framework. So that's the environmental, social, and governance framework. And we do something similar. So at VFS Global, the entire sustainability part is part of the ESG roadmap of our parent company, which is a Swedish private equity company, and we have a Swiss foundation, the Kuoni Foundation, who has a stake in VFS Global. And of course, you might know the Scandinavian companies, they had always been very strong and serious about CSR. And that was the reason then also why all the portfolio companies of EQT, the parent company of VFS Global, follow a certain pattern when it comes to ESG. That's even the board of directors looks into that concept, that strategy, and the KPIs and all these things. And the executive board is also definitely involved in the strategy. So nowadays it has to be part of the strategy of the company, and not just a kind of PR vehicle.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's a great point. And I like the last part about how can it be, looked at more from a conscience perspective and not really marketing of the CSR work. So how does your organization go about communicating CSR? What are some of the channels, resources, methods that you all use?
It depends very much on the topic. So we have certain topics where we support organizations outside of the company. We have certain topics where we do employee engagement with all our staff as global initiatives or in regions. And then it depends very much, do we use the kind of video channel we have internally. We use the intranet, just normal mails. But of course, when it comes internally, it can be something externally, it can be something with video. Of course, social media, very powerful for these things, or even simple press releases or what we use on the website. We had done such initiatives. So we use actually all the channels that we nowadays have in communications, primarily digital. We would not advertise something in print because it's too expensive at the end of the day. And you can actually interact with the audience, especially the external audience, very well through social media channels. And there we use not just kind of Twitter or Instagram, we use also LinkedIn, especially when it's more for a professional community. That's it depends very much on the topic, and then we use the variety of the channels and we tailor-made it then a little bit according to concept.
Fantastic. So, if I were to ask you, is there a dedicated team for communication? Is there someone who looks into it more specifically? And, what are some of the, I'm curious to know, what are some of the skills that you think are important for CSR communication, and what does the organization really value in them?
In my view, CSR belongs to a communications department, or in our case, a corporate communications department. I know companies where they have it in the marketing, where it is attached to HR, or even worse, to legal department. That's wrong in my view, because the corporate communications team usually also reports into the CEO. And if CSR is in a corporate communications team in the responsibility of corporate communication, and corporate communication reports to the CEO of a company, then it gets also the necessary weight, the seriousness, and the attention of the CEO and the executive board. So in our company, it is my responsibility as the chief communications officer. And then I have a fabulous execution team, the head of corporate communications, and a head of CSR. She's also at the same time responsible for internal communication, because I think it has a lot to do, CSR and internal communication, with employee engagement. That's why we put that together. Yes, we do also communicate externally, but I think it's important to have that in the area where somebody has good skills, not only in CSR, but also in internal communication, exactly for employee engagement. Because if you do proper employee engagement with CSR topics, the employees appreciate very much what the companies are doing. And there's a lot of word of mouth where people say, oh, wow, I want to work with this company because they take these things serious. So that combines everything a little bit into that.
Fantastic. So in terms of budgets, and I'm not interested in the exact amount, but I'm more curious about how does the budget get allocated, and what do you really focus on in terms of activities from a CSR perspective?
So we divide the budget pretty much for global initiatives, which are centrally steered from our corporate communications department in Mumbai and from the head office here in Dubai. So there's a budget allocation which is centrally. But then also, since we are a global company and we are present in more than 140 countries, we have regions defined as per organization, and they have also a budget and they can use. But of course, they have to use it within a framework which is defined according to our CSR strategy, which has a strong focus on environmental initiatives and education. And then, of course, the volunteering program, what we do as employee engagement with our own staff. And the regions, they can define locally who they want to support or what kind of actions they want to take with that money, what they have. Yes, 2019 is a challenge because with the COVID-19 and the pandemic, companies struggle. They, of course, they cut budgets, they look into cost, and of course, also CSR is affected by that. So we have to become more creative now as we have less budgets for this year. That's also a kind of interesting challenge to with less money, do more and get nevertheless a good impact on CSR topics.
Got it. Brilliant. Yeah. And so what are some of the trends that you spot with CSR, and how do you think it's in terms of relation with internal stakeholders? Anything that comes to your mind?
Well, the trends are definitely that it gets very serious for companies. They take it serious. I think the trend is that we go away from the word CSR, this corporate social responsibility. It is more about sustainability, sustainability of the company, because it has a lot of effects that come into sustainability. Often CSR is used just for PR purposes. And I think when I say a lot of companies are taking it seriously, they get away from just doing PR about what they do. Of course, you can talk about all the good things you do in your sustainability activities, but you should not just use it as a PR vehicle. You should really take it serious in terms of a clear strategy. You set the KPIs, what you measure in terms of environmental things, educational things, of course, also the compliance topics, data protection, and all these. That depends on the industry you're working in. And there I see the trend that also the people working in CSR or sustainability in the future probably have to be highly skilled or better skilled than they had been in the past. Because investors looking at it, board of directors looking at it, owner companies looking at it, and you have to report and show the seriousness that you achieve your KPIs, your goals you set when you want to kind of decrease your greenhouse gas emissions every year. What are your initiatives? What are you doing in the business? So CSR sustainability becomes part of operations, of strategy of a company, and that's what I'm seeing as a trend when it comes to CSR topics or sustainability, as I say.
Fantastic. And you did briefly mention about how you all communicate internally, but I just want to know, are there some specific principles and some philosophy that you all follow in terms of how you all go about the practice?
Yes, of course. We have our kind of strategy, which is annually reviewed even by the board of directors. Although we're not a listed company, but the seriousness is there because part of our parent company, EQT, where they have the ESG roadmap for all their portfolio companies. So we follow that strictly. And even before, VFS Global belonged to the Kuoni Group in Switzerland. And Kuoni as a big tour operator globally at that time. Of course, we followed very much all the CSR topics when it comes to environmental topics, to society topics, and so on. So the philosophy is still in there that we want to give something back to communities where we work. And that's why we have the two core areas in our CSR strategy. As I mentioned, it's the environment and it's education. So where we support underprivileged people to get better education, to get access to education, because education is the key to get out of poverty, more or less, in many, many countries. And of course, we do more in countries like in South Asia, in Africa, or even the Middle East, than we would do probably in Europe or the Americas, as the educational system are much more there. So that's the kind of philosophy we have overall: clear strategy, clear framework, what we want to achieve, and that's more or less part of it.
Could you describe a campaign that you're personally proud of, where there has been a significant business or a social impact that you could make with your CSR work?
Yeah, recent campaign we did, and actually we did it just before the pandemic started. So in Q4 last year and in the first quarter this year, is a campaign called Give for Good, and that's a volunteering program. So we introduced, as part of our activities and strategies, very much last year, the volunteering program. We have a strong volunteering movement as part of our Russian entity, of our Russian operations, called Dadobro. Good, say yes to good. I think that's something translated, but we call it Give for Good. When we use it globally, it's more or less an internal thing, but of course we communicate it also to the external, where employees have a certain time every year to join volunteering programs.
Right.
For example, we did We went to some schools in India, our local staff there, and they kind of helped renovating the schools. They painted the walls or whatever needed to be fixed. And I saw pictures and I was deeply impressed how many of our people really with a lot of passion and dedication supported these schools. So that was a good campaign. And of course, this is something doesn't come out as at the big cost. We just give time, work time for the employees instead of being at the office or the visa application center. They get the time going out to the people, to the communities, and do something good. Another one was the World Environment Day, where we did a lot of also with the external audience, a lot of initiatives. So we had a quiz on our global website. We did a lot of media work related to that, since we have a lot of initiatives in terms of greenhouse gas emissions reduction. For example, we shortly before the World Environment Day, we inaugurated the first plastic bottle-free visa application center over here in Dubai. So we really want to get rid of plastic, but plastic is a problem in the world. Unfortunately, the pandemic put a little bit of stop on that project, but we still want to go for it, or for renewable energy and kind of these things. So we combined that all into our World Environment Day activities. And of course, on social media, you see a lot of that, what we did on our separate channels.
Right. And if I could, ask you on that, those campaigns which you worked on, was there any specific metrics, or in terms of how did you measure the success of those campaigns?
Well, for the Gift to Good, the volunteering program is more or less we measured how many people contributed and what have they been done. Of course, that is sometimes a little bit difficult to measure if they renovated school or painted kind of buildings or whatever they could support. For the World Environmental Day, it's of course it's awareness raising. Because we could measure, of course, how much did we reach the public through social media, through media articles, the opinion pieces on sustainability, articles we did, how many people participated in the quiz and so on. It is more an awareness thing that we should take care of this planet, because we have only this one and we're only guests, and the planet is here before us.
Right. That's a great point. That's a nice way of putting it. So, what's your advice for CSR practitioners? How can they go about being more effective with communication?
I think it's important that, and I mentioned it, that probably the skills are now a little bit more advanced. If somebody wants to go into the CSR sustainability field in a corporate and maybe also in a listed company, then even more, it would be good to have a kind of an education that supports all these kind of requirements. So people should be aware, what is ESG, the environmental social government? What are the UN SDGs, these sustainable development goals? More and more companies going into these. And then, of course, the GRI, the reporting, what is there, or the IR, the integrated reporting, that's mainly for listed companies, but also non-listed companies do it because it gives a lot of transparencies. So it can be a really exciting job there, but of course, as a corporate, we would only hire somebody who had done that before in a big company. So our CSR responsible person has worked in a larger Indian company who handled these things very well. And she supported also very well for our first time sustainability report, which we published in February for the year 2019 to give transparency what we do in sustainability. So people should also have an understanding, how is a sustainability report created? What are the KPIs to achieve that? What are the processes? So the person then should also understand and know the company very well and the process. Actually, this person needs a very good overview of the company because in sustainability, a lot of things come really together from all the departments to showcase, to bring up the story, what is really sustainable. Project management, very important. Person must be a really good project management person. Also understand the reporting, what I just described with the GRI or the integrated reporting, to have there a good understanding, and the business understanding I have mentioned, which of course over time when somebody joins a company, it's important that the person sees into as much as departments as possible to get a good understanding of the company.
Got it. I know, and I know you partially answered the question, but if there is someone who's starting out in their career with CSR and they want to join this domain, what advice would you give them?
I think a good advice is to really, if they're young and they start, to maybe work also for an NGO that work in certain areas. And especially in India, there's so many NGOs and really great organizations. We support also many of these organizations, but particularly in the area of education and environment, to get an understanding and the processes. Because when you are with such an organization that gets funds from corporates, then you have a first interaction with corporates. You understand what are the requirements and how do corporates tick, and what are the requirements or the needs of a charity organization or an NGO. I think that would be a good start. If somebody wants to start immediately in a corporate, of course, in a smaller corporate where they already have a CSR department, or if they have the chance to go on an internship in a corporate where they look for somebody to support in CSR. I think this would be good kind of first moves to get into a professional life with a key focus on sustainability topics.
Fantastic. And as we wrap up, Peter, I just wanted to understand, what are your thoughts on how can organizations get better with CSR communication? What are some of the levers? Like, should leaders be more engaged? How can we, think of some of the other aspects around it? So what are your views there?
I think it needs a strong and clear buy-in by the management. And I think CSR must report to the CEO. It has to be also part of the business strategy. So if a company has a strategy how they will further grow the business, they should also think, how can sustainability play a role in the business strategy? Of course, usually it is not just looked at the CSR and then created the business strategy, but it has to flow in nowadays. And especially when a company is bigger and looking for investors and funding, investors look nowadays to that. And I think after this pandemic, although it's not unfortunately over yet, investors will look even more how sustainable companies work. And that's my advice to people: really look into their business strategy and their CSR, sustainability strategy, and how can they kind of integrate the CSR strategy into their business strategy, or where are the touch points where they can improve. Important is also not just to talk about it or set up certain process. It is important, set goals, measure them, and take kind of measures to achieve these goals. And also track them further, implement processes, initiatives to work with the employees, to work with other stakeholders to achieve these goals that are set usually annually.
Fantastic. This has been brilliant, Peter. Thank you so much for doing this. These are fantastic responses, and I'm sure our viewers love all of them. Thank you again for taking the time to do this.
Thank you very much, Anisu, and it was a pleasure contributing here, and wish everyone good luck with it.
Thank you.